Thank you, choir, for that beautiful anthem. It was the fall of 1987, and nothing was well in my soul. I was 15 years old, and my family had just moved for the second time in 2 years to a new state. Now, I promise this is not because we were in the witness protection program, which is exactly what someone in the witness protection program would say. I knew you'd get there. It's just that for whatever reason, my father's job had taken me from our family from Carmel, Indiana, at the time a little town in central Indiana, to Wichita, Kansas, a still little town? I don't know. And right back to Carmel, Indiana, almost a year to the day after moving away. And I was struggling because while admittedly moving back to somewhere you had been before isn't as hard as it could be, any move during teenage years is really difficult. And so I had friends originally in Indiana, and then I had to move away from them, and I committed to trying to make new friends, and then right away I had to move again. And even though I had come back to some of my old friends who were still there, we were all a little bit different. Things were different. And I was just having a hard time. And so the school year had started, and I was trying to navigate this familiar yet also disorienting place when a friend of mine said that he had an extra ticket to see the band U2 at the Hoosier Dome, which is where the Indianapolis Colts used to play. Now, this was their Joshua Tree tour, the tour that really put them into global stardom. And I'm seeing some people nod, so where are my Gen Xers at? Okay, good. This was the tour that had the songs With or Without You, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Where the Streets Have No Name. And I wasn't really a huge fan of the band at the time, but I knew those songs, and so of course I went, a concert, and it was epic. If you've ever seen U2 in concert, you know that they are known for some of the most amazing concerts, especially in those big settings of stadiums like the Hoosier Dome. But the best part of the concert, it was not all the songs that I knew from the Joshua Tree. It was at the very end, during the encore, when they started to play this simple 2-chord song that had this repeated refrain, I will sing a new song. Over and over they sang that, I will sing a new song. I will sing a new song. And of course, as happens in concerts like that, everyone in the stadium started to sing along. And then they did the strangest thing. One by one, the band put their instruments down and started to leave, just quietly, as we continued to sing, I will sing a new song. Eventually, the band was gone from the stage, and we're still singing, I will sing a new song. The lights come up in the dome, I will sing a new song. We're heading for the exits, I will sing a new song. And it felt like even as we got to our cars, all 40,000 of us were still singing, I will sing a new song. Have you ever experienced a moment like that? One of those incredible, magical, really, unifying moments that I think music is uniquely able to bring us? This moment where, in this case, 40,000 people who didn't know each other, feeling unified, singing this one phrase together. For me, experiencing this disorientation of being back in Indiana, it grounded me. And it gave me some strength that I needed to get through my new situation. Now, like I said, this was 1987, so there was no YouTube, there were no smartphones, there was no Shazam, there was no Spotify, and there was not even any Google. So it was hard for me to figure out, where did this song come from? So I had to go to something called a record store. Now, kids, that's where we used to go to buy music. And so I went to this record store, and I had to get the old U2 albums out and go to the listening station and put on the headphones and try and find this song, which was still stuck in my head. I will sing a new song. And I found it tucked away in the last track of their 1983 album entitled War. And I pulled out the liner notes and I listened to it, and the rest of the lyrics went like this. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined and heard my cry. He brought me up out of the pit, out of the miry clay. I will sing a new song. I was so excited to find that song. Now, I didn't really have any kind of faith. I certainly hadn't read the Bible, but it didn't take a genius to figure out this was a deeply spiritual song. So again, without the aid of Google, I tried to find out, where does this song come from? And I learned that this song was taken directly from the first few verses of Psalm 40. So that when we were all singing that, the band had tricked us into singing Scripture. And as it turns out, this is something that they commonly would do. In fact, in their very famous 1984 concert at Red Rocks, they ended their concert that same way, quietly leaving the stage, letting this Scripture be sung by the crowd. So Psalm 40, the first 5 verses at least, read in the Common English Bible version, go like this. I put all my hope in the Lord. He leaned down to me. He listened to my cry for help. He lifted me out of the pit of death, out of the mud and the filth, and set my feet on solid rock. He steadied my legs. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise for our God. Many people will learn of this and be amazed. They will trust the Lord. Those who put their trust in the Lord, who pay no attention to the proud or to those who follow lies, are truly happy. You, Lord my God, you've done so many things. Your wonderful deeds and your plans for us, no one can compare with you. If I were to proclaim and talk about all of them, they would be too numerous to count. Now, the Psalms have always been my favorite part of Scripture. And I actually think that that's often common for artists, because the Psalms themselves are art. They've often been called the church's songbook. The Psalms contain more poetic imagery than any book in the Bible. It's also the book that Jesus quoted the most when he quoted what we now know as the Old Testament. And to me, the Psalms have the most honest language in the Bible. Because David, we know a very complicated character, and the other psalmists, they didn't just talk to God in the happy times. Oh God, everything is so wonderful. Thank you, God, for everything that is so perfect in my life. I mean, those psalms do exist, but also there are psalms that have angry and frustrated language. God, why aren't you acting in this situation? God, why are you letting these people prevail? And I think that's one of the reasons I love them as well, because in the Psalms, we get to see that characters in the Bible, just like us, experienced the full spectrum of what it means to be human. And that having a relationship with God means having a relationship with a God who is not offended by our frustrated or even angry words. Instead, a God who leans in close when we are honest. And that's what I love about the Psalms, and Psalm 40 is no different. It follows a somewhat common theme in the book of Psalms, where the psalmist starts off talking about a situation that the psalmist would like to change. And then the writer calls on God to be there. And then there's this moment, in this case, when the writer of this psalm says that he feels like he's in a pit, when he senses God begin to lift him out. And that's where we get that third verse. God put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise for our God. The verse that you too decided to highlight in the repeated refrain, I will sing a new song. This idea of God putting a new song in our mouth is not uncommon. In fact, we encounter it 6 times throughout the Psalms. And it's also featured in the book of Isaiah, 42nd chapter, where the prophet Isaiah is describing what many believe is announcing that Jesus is to come. This idea of a new beginning. And I don't think it's simply a metaphor. I understand maybe not everyone here loves music as much as I do, but music is all over scriptures. There are many times, the Psalms being the church's songbook, they have been the songs that the church has sung from the beginning of Israelites all the way through to today. Music has been incredibly important. And so this idea of a new song is really important in something that the Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann talks about. Walter Brueggemann says that we often live our lives in one of three different places where we find ourselves, three different states. There's orientation, that state where everything is just happening how it should. So if you woke up this morning and your coffee tasted just right, your car started, no one was a jerk on the road, everything was just good and everything's going well in your life. We don't live there too often, do we? But it's a state of being that we sometimes have. Then there's disorientation. And that's that time when life has just kicked us unfairly. We find ourselves experiencing some kind of tragedy. We don't know where to turn. We don't even know which way is up. We don't know what to do. And the third state of living that Brueggemann describes is a state of then reorientation. This one I feel like is pretty common. We've been through some stuff. We've been through a storm. We've been through the pit that the psalmist talks about. But we're beginning to see God. We're beginning to see that God's hand is there in our life, lifting us up out of the pit. It's that third state, reorientation, that the psalmist in Psalm 40 is talking about. And Brueggemann says that in that experience, we get a surprising gift of new life just when none had been expected. Now, thinking way back to 1987, that's exactly how I felt coming out of that U2 concert, singing what I didn't even know was a message from God for all of us. I felt like I was grounded, and I felt like I was being given a gift of reorientation, that for some reason, just I could take some strength from those verses and from that melody that played over and over in my head. That's the power of music, isn't it? To remind us of things. Here in my phone, I have hundreds of playlists that I've created, and maybe you do too. Playlists for all sorts of times of life. Playlists that I've created at important family moments. Playlists that I put on when things are going well, and I just want to celebrate it and be happy. And then I have a few playlists for the times that are dark. I have playlists that I go to when my depression is getting the best of me. 40 by U2 still lives on that playlist for me. Now, here in a setting of faith, a community of people who come here each and every week who believe in the power of God, it's no surprise to us that music is this important. Jerome and Shayla and I, each and every week, we get together to plan the music for worship services, plan the hymns that we will sing, plan the special music pieces that our talented artists will present to us. And we do it not just because it's our job, we do it because really it's a calling. And it's a calling that is born out of a deep knowledge that on any given Sunday, a song that we might have picked prayerfully might be exactly the new song that you or I need. Dr. King, who we celebrate today on his birthday, was no stranger to this concept either. Music was incredibly important to Dr. King's ministry. So much so that in 1963, the March on Washington, the famous I Have a Dream speech, Mahalia Jackson was chosen to sing. But not just Mahalia, Bob Dylan sang, Marian Anderson, Joan Baez, all of them sang, and that's because Dr. King understood that his message and his words, as powerful as they are made more powerful when there is a new song given to sing, something that can stick with us and be memorable. Dr. King, throughout the orientation, disorientation, and reorientation of what we call the civil rights movement in the 60s, also talked a lot about the importance of jazz music. And in fact, a little-known address he gave to the 1964 Berlin Jazz Festival, he said these things: God has wrought many things out of oppression. He has endowed his creatures with the capacity to create, and from this capacity has flowed the sweet songs of sorrow and joy that have allowed us to cope with our environment in many different situations. Jazz speaks for life. The blues tell the story of life's difficulties, and if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph. This is triumphant music. It is no wonder that so much of the search for identity was championed by jazz musicians. Long before the modern essayists and scholars wrote of racial identity as a problem for a multiracial world, musicians were returning to their roots to affirm that which was stirring within their souls. And he ends with this beautiful quote that is on your screen. Much of the power of our freedom movement in the United States has come from this music. It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms when courage began to fail. It has calmed us with its rich harmonies when spirits were down. Now that is a man who understands what it means to sing a new song. And all throughout the orientation, disorientation, and reorientation of the fight for racial equality, a cycle that unfortunately we are still in, Dr. King continually returned to the new songs God would give. And Dr. King continually shared with the psalmist in Psalm 40, saying, I will sing a new song. In fact, his very, very last words, spoken on April 4th, 1968, from the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, were to jazz musician Ben Branch, who was due to play that night to lead the music at their meeting. And from the balcony, Dr. King saw Ben down in the parking lot, and he yelled down to him, Ben, play Precious Lord at the meeting tonight. Play it real sweetly. And it was just moments later that the shot came from across the street that took his life, sending that fight for equality back into a cycle of disorientation. So this morning, where are we all living? Are you oriented? Are you feeling like you are in a place of orientation where things are generally how you're expecting them? The world is making some sense? If so, I celebrate that with you. That's a wonderful place to be. Are you in a state right now of disorientation where the unexpected and maybe the unimaginable has happened? If so, I grieve with you today. Or maybe you're in a state of reorientation where difficult things have happened. You have had some storms that you have been weathering, and you're not fully righted yet, but you know that God is there, and you can feel God's presence lifting you up out of a pit. No matter what state you are in, there is a new song that God wants to give you, just as God gave to the psalmists in these verses. I'm going to invite Jacob and Jerome and Edward up, and as I do, I want to invite you to think about What is your new song today? Maybe it is Psalm 40. Maybe it is great is thy faithfulness, or it is well with my soul. Or maybe it's that fifth song on your playlist on your phone that no one else listens to that you just call Tough Times. Maybe it's not even a song. Maybe it's a poem. Maybe it's a movie. Maybe it's a reading. Maybe it's some other piece of art, something that sticks with you, that reminds you that I ain't there yet, but God is lifting me up out of the pit. The other refrain in U2's version of Psalm 40 is an expression of asking how long, which comes from that first line of the psalm, I waited patiently for the Lord. Because the truth is, none of this happens necessarily immediately. And sometimes we have to wait for reorientation and for God to show up. So as they play this song now, I invite you to be present with God and listen for your own new song.